Hey friends, welcome to another episode of English 101. Today, I'll take you on a journey through my first day at a new job, full of excitement, nerves, and little wins. It's the perfect story for anyone starting something new. Let's dive in and learn English together. My first day at a new job. The morning sun peeked through the curtains as I slowly opened my eyes. My heart was already racing because today was the first day of my new job. I lay in bed for a moment, trying to calm my nerves and collect my thoughts. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock on my nightstand. I sat up, stretched my arms, and reminded myself that everything was going to be just fine. After all, I had prepared for this moment for weeks, and now it was finally here. I stepped into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The shock of it made me fully awake and brought a small smile to my lips. I looked in the mirror and said softly, "You've got this." Brushing my teeth, I made a mental checklist of everything I needed to do before leaving the house. Back in my room, I carefully picked out my outfit, a crisp white shirt and navy blue trousers that made me feel confident and neat. I ironed them the night before to make sure they looked perfect. In the kitchen, I brewed a cup of black coffee and made some toast with butter and jam. The smell of breakfast filled the small apartment and made me feel more at ease. I ate slowly while going over my job responsibilities in my head. After finishing my meal, I checked the weather on my phone. Sunny and mild, just how I liked it. I packed my bag, making sure I had my notebook, ID, pen, and a bottle of water. I slipped on my shoes and stood by the door, pausing one last time to breathe deeply before stepping out into the world. The streets were alive with the usual morning sounds: cars, birds, and people heading to work or school. The breeze was gentle, and the sunlight felt warm on my skin. As I walked to the bus stop, I kept rehearsing my introduction in my mind. "Hi, I'm Emma, and I'm excited to be part of the team." It sounded simple enough, but I wanted to make a good impression. The bus arrived right on time, and I found a seat near the window. Watching the familiar streets pass by, I thought about how different my routine was now. A new job meant new people, new challenges, and hopefully, new growth. 20 minutes later, I got off the bus and found myself standing in front of a tall, glass office building. The design was modern, and the lobby looked bright and inviting. I walked through the revolving doors and was greeted by a cheerful receptionist who smiled and said, "Good morning, how can I help you?" I introduced myself and explained that it was my first day. She welcomed me kindly and handed me a visitor badge, pointing me toward the elevators. As I waited for the elevator, I noticed my reflection in the metal doors. I straightened my shirt and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. The ride up to the 5th floor was short, but filled with butterflies in my stomach. When the doors opened, I saw a friendly woman waiting just outside. She extended her hand and said, "You must be Emma." "I'm Sarah, your team leader." Her voice was warm and her smile genuine. I shook her hand and introduced myself again, feeling a bit more confident. Sarah led me through the open office space, showing me where everything was: the kitchen, the break room, the bathrooms, and finally, my desk. It was by a large window with a view of the city skyline. On the desk was a small card that said, "Welcome, Emma," written in neat handwriting. That small gesture meant a lot to me. Sarah told me to take my time settling in and that we had a team meeting at 10 a.m. I thanked her and sat down. opening my notebook to jot down a few first impressions. The office was bright, modern, and filled with quiet energy. People worked at their desks, some chatting softly, others focused on their screens. The atmosphere felt welcoming and productive. 10 minutes later, a tall man named Jason came by and introduced himself. "If you need help with anything, just ask," he said with a friendly smile. I thanked him and appreciated his kindness. At exactly 10 a.m., I made my way to the meeting room where the rest of the team had gathered. Sarah welcomed everyone and introduced me to the group. They clapped politely, and I felt a mix of shyness and joy. I stood up and said a few words about myself, where I came from, my background, and how excited I was to be joining the company. The team seemed genuinely interested, and a few people even asked follow-up questions. The meeting went on for about 30 minutes, covering the week's goals, upcoming projects, and team responsibilities. I took notes, trying to absorb as much as possible. Some of the terms were new, but I knew I would learn with time. After the meeting, Sarah handed me a welcome packet with useful information about the company's policies, schedules, and contacts. I spent the next hour reading through the materials and setting up my email account. Around noon, a few team members invited me to lunch. We walked to a nearby cafe and talked about work, hobbies, and favorite lunch spots in the city. It was a relaxed and friendly conversation, and I felt more at home. After lunch, we returned to the office, and I felt lighter. Eating with my coworkers made me feel included and less like the new person. I returned to my desk, refreshed and ready to continue learning. Sarah stopped by again and asked if I wanted to sit in on a training session. I agreed immediately. We walked together to a small conference room where another team member, Alex, was waiting. He was in charge of onboarding and would walk me through the software and tools we used. Alex was patient and explained everything step by step. He even answered all my questions with enthusiasm. I took careful notes and tried out the systems on my laptop while he watched. It felt good to be actively involved and not just sitting idle. The session lasted about an hour, and I felt much more confident afterward. Back at my desk, I practiced using the software and sent a test email to Sarah to confirm my setup was working. She replied quickly with a thumbs-up emoji and a kind message. "Great job on your first day so far." That little encouragement meant more than she probably realized. Around mid-afternoon, I got my first small task, reviewing a client file and summarizing key points in a report. I opened the file and read through it carefully, making notes and identifying important details. I typed up a summary and sent it to Sarah for review. She responded after a few minutes, saying the summary was clear and well written. Encouraged by her feedback, I continued exploring the shared folders on the company server and familiarized myself with recent projects. I made a list of questions to ask later, knowing that showing curiosity would be a good thing. At 4 p.m., there was a quick stand-up meeting where everyone shared their progress. It was casual and brief, but I appreciated seeing how the team collaborated. I introduced myself again during the meeting and thanked everyone for being so welcoming. One of my teammates, Nora, mentioned that she also felt nervous on her first day but said, "It gets better really quickly." That reassured me more than she knew. As the day started winding down, I reflected on how much I'd learned in just a few hours. I looked out the window from my desk, watching the sun begin its slow descent behind the tall buildings. The sky was painted in warm shades of orange and pink. I checked my email one last time and organized my notes for tomorrow. I also updated my task list and set a reminder for the next morning. Sarah came by one final time to check in. "You did great today," she said kindly. "We're happy to have you on board." I smiled, thanked her, and let her know I was excited about what's ahead. Before leaving, I cleaned up my desk and packed my bag, making sure I didn't forget anything. On the elevator ride down, I felt tired but happy. There was something deeply satisfying about completing the first day. Outside, the air was cooler, and the streets were buzzing with people heading home. I walked to the bus stop with a small sense of pride in my chest. On the bus, I watched the city pass by, thinking about everything that happened today. I texted my best friend. "First day went well. People are nice, and the job seems manageable." She replied instantly with, "I told you so." Back at home, I changed into comfortable clothes and made myself a cup of tea. I sat by the window sipping slowly, replaying the day in my mind. My cat jumped into my lap, purring softly as if to welcome me back. I smiled and gave her a gentle scratch behind the ears. I opened my notebook and added a journal entry about my first day. Writing helped me process the small wins and also reminded me of the areas I wanted to improve. I promised myself I'd keep learning and growing each day. Around 8 p.m., I made a simple dinner, pasta with vegetables, and watched a light-hearted TV show to relax. After dinner, I washed the dishes and tidied up the kitchen. I checked my calendar for tomorrow and saw that I had another short training session in the morning. I felt ready for it. I prepared my clothes for the next day, placing them neatly on a chair. Then I set my alarm and got ready for bed. Lying under the blanket, I felt grateful for the opportunity and the kindness of strangers who quickly became colleagues. I whispered to myself, "One day down, many more to go." I turned off the light and let my tired eyes close. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The sunlight was gently filtering through my curtains, and I felt a mix of nervousness and excitement again. I stretched in bed for a moment before getting up. I went to the kitchen and made myself a light breakfast: toast, scrambled eggs, and a banana. As I ate, I replayed yesterday's moments in my head, remembering the friendly faces and the encouraging words. After finishing my breakfast, I got dressed in the outfit I'd prepared the night before. I checked my bag, made sure I had my notebook, pen, and ID badge, and then headed out the door. The bus ride felt familiar now, like part of a new routine forming. I watched the city morning come to life. Cafes opening, people hurrying to work, and the usual rhythm of urban mornings. When I arrived at the office, I was greeted with a warm smile from the receptionist. "Good morning. Back for round 2?" she joked. I laughed and nodded. I went up to the office floor and sat down at my desk. My computer started quickly, and I checked my email. There was a welcome message from the HR department with helpful resources and contact information. Shortly after, Sarah appeared again. "Ready for your next challenge?" she asked. I nodded enthusiastically. She told me I would be shadowing another team member named David today. He was working on a project that required attention to detail and strong writing skills, so it would be a good match. David introduced himself with a firm handshake and a warm tone. He walked me through the current project, an internal report analyzing customer feedback, and suggesting improvements. It was interesting to see how much thought went into small decisions in the company. I followed along as David opened files, discussed insights, and highlighted trends. He explained each step patiently and asked if I had questions. I did, and he answered each one in detail. I appreciated how open and collaborative the environment was. After about an hour of shadowing, he asked if I wanted to try drafting a section of the report. I was excited for the opportunity and said yes. He gave me clear instructions, and I started typing on my own computer. I focused on structure, clarity, and including the data points we had discussed. David reviewed my draft and said, "This is a strong start. Well done." At lunchtime, I joined David and 2 other colleagues for a quick meal at a nearby cafe. We talked about our favorite lunch spots, and they recommended a few hidden gems around the neighborhood. I felt like I was becoming part of their small world. We laughed about silly office moments and talked about weekend plans. One of them, Priya, mentioned a team outing planned for next week. She invited me to come along and said it would be a good way to bond outside of work. I smiled and accepted the invitation. After lunch, I returned to the office feeling energized. David had set up a brief meeting with his manager to introduce me and explain how I'd been contributing. It was informal but professional. His manager, Rachel, was kind and asked about my background and what I hoped to gain from this job. I told her honestly that I wanted to learn, grow, and become a valuable member of the team. She nodded and said, "That's exactly the kind of attitude we love here." I felt proud and motivated. After the meeting, I worked on revising the section of the report based on David's feedback. I enjoyed the process of refining the content and making it stronger. Later in the afternoon, there was a team meeting where each person shared their weekly goals. I was invited to observe, and I listened carefully. It helped me understand how everyone's work connected and how each goal supported the company's mission. I took notes and thought about how my role would evolve. After the meeting, Sarah asked how I was finding everything so far. I told her honestly that I was learning a lot and felt more confident each hour. She smiled and said, "That's exactly what we want. You're doing great." That made me feel even more welcome. As the day came to a close, I wrapped up my work, cleaned my desk, and checked my calendar for tomorrow. I also reviewed my task list and set priorities. I wanted to start tomorrow with clarity and purpose. On the way out, I passed by a wall filled with team photos and motivational quotes. One quote caught my eye. "Every expert was once a beginner." It stayed with me as I left the building and stepped out into the cool air of early evening. I took a deep breath and walked to the bus stop, feeling a growing sense of belonging and determination. On the bus ride home, I reflected on the new skills I was developing and the supportive environment I was lucky to be part of. Back at home, I made a healthy dinner and spent some time journaling again. I wrote about David's helpful guidance, Rachel's positive feedback, and the new friends I was beginning to make. It felt like the beginning of something meaningful. I also made a note to research more about the customer trends we'd discussed earlier. I wanted to contribute ideas in future meetings. After finishing my journal entry, I relaxed on the couch and listened to some music. Then I got ready for bed, feeling tired but proud once again. I thought about how much had changed in just 2 days and how much more was possible. I turned off the lights, settled under the blanket, and whispered to myself, "Let's keep going." The third day felt different. I woke up with a sense of routine forming and less of the nervous flutter I had felt before. My alarm clock buzzed at 7 a.m., but I was already awake. I showered, got dressed in a sharp, yet comfortable outfit, and made myself a cup of tea. As I sipped it near the window, I noticed how familiar my new surroundings were beginning to feel. There was a rhythm now: morning, commute, the office. I was slowly becoming a part of something bigger. I packed my lunch, grabbed my bag, and headed out the door with a small smile. On the bus, I read an article about productivity and how successful people structure their mornings. It made me think about how I could improve my workflow. I arrived at the office a few minutes early and used the extra time to organize my desk and review the report draft I had worked on yesterday. I made small improvements and added a few suggestions for David. He appreciated the initiative and encouraged me to present one section during our afternoon team huddle. It was a chance to speak up and share ideas. I was nervous, but I knew I had to try. Before the meeting, I practiced in front of the mirror in the break room. I whispered my main points to myself, paced slowly, and reminded myself to breathe. When the time came, I stood up confidently and explained my section of the report. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice was steady. After I finished, I saw nods around the table. Sarah said, "Excellent job. You brought a fresh perspective." David gave me a thumbs up. That moment made me feel like I belonged, that my voice mattered. I wrote it in my mental journal. First time speaking in a team meeting. Success. The rest of the afternoon went smoothly. I helped Priya with formatting a presentation, answered a few emails, and even joined a casual brainstorming session. It felt like I was no longer just observing, but actively contributing. Around 4 p.m., I got a message from Rachel inviting me for a quick coffee chat in the break room. She asked how I was adjusting. I told her I felt welcomed and motivated. She told me to keep being curious and to never be afraid to ask questions. "Your first days shape your entire journey," she said with a kind smile. I took her words seriously. Later, I had a video call with another team member who worked remotely. Her name was Mia, and she was in another city. She explained how the remote team handled client communications and how they kept in sync with the main office. I admired how organized everything was and how clear their processes were. She shared a document with me on communication protocols, and I thanked her for her time. It was clear that this company valued structure, openness, and connection. I felt lucky to be here. I sent her a follow-up email and noted her tips for future reference. By 5:30, I logged out of my computer and stretched at my desk. I took a moment to look around. People were wrapping up, chatting softly, or heading out. I picked up my bag and took one last glance at my calendar. Tomorrow's tasks were lined up, and I felt prepared. I walked out of the office, down the elevator, and into the early evening air. The city was still bustling, but I felt calm. I stopped at a nearby park bench, sat for a moment, and watched people walk by. I felt part of this world in a new way, more connected, more present. At home, I made a warm dinner, grilled chicken and vegetables. I listened to soft music as I cooked, still thinking about the day. After eating, I sat down with my notebook and journaled once more. I wrote about Rachel's advice, my meeting moment, and how I was learning to trust myself more. I was beginning to notice how growth doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like quiet, steady progress. And that was enough. After writing, I watched a short documentary to unwind. It was about people who made big changes in their careers and how they found purpose. It resonated deeply. Before bed, I laid out my clothes for the next day and tidied up my room. I felt organized, both outside and within. I brushed my teeth, washed my face, and took one final look in the mirror. "You're doing great," I whispered to myself, not out of pride, but reassurance. I turned off the lights, crawled under the blanket, and let the stillness of the night hold me. My phone buzzed once, a goodnight text from my mom. I smiled, replied, and put it down. Sleep came easier now, like my body trusted that tomorrow would be another good step forward. The job was still new, challenges still ahead, but I was no longer afraid. I was learning, growing, and showing up as myself. Every day brought lessons, some small, some big. The people were kind, the work was meaningful, and I felt like I was building a foundation. The fear of the unknown was slowly being replaced with the thrill of possibility. I didn't know exactly where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long while, I was excited to find out. With that thought, I drifted into sleep, dreaming not just of work, but of a future I was finally building, one small step at a time. Thanks for joining me on this journey today. If you enjoyed this story and learned something new, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for daily English podcasts, and share it with your friends. Keep listening, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next episode.